But we begin tonight with new details on the secretive religious organization that finds itself at the center of two major Republican sex scandals this summer. The group is called The Family, and they run a house that a number of members of Congress live in Washington, D.C. It's called C Street. Now, we've learned this summer that both Senator John Ensign of Nevada and Governor Mark Sanford of South Carolina got counseling of some sort at C Street while they were both carrying on their extramarital affairs. As C Street has become an integral part of the story of those two scandals, the group's trademark extreme secrecy appears to be starting to crack. First, we have new comments to report about The Family and C Street from Republican Congressman Zach Wamp of Tennessee. Congressman Wamp has lived at the C Street house for 12 years. After the Ensign scandal broke, he spoke to the Knoxville News Sentinel about it, and they reported, quote, "The C Street residents have all agreed they won't talk about their private living arrangements," Wamp said, and he intends to honor that pact. Quoting him, "I hate it that John Ensign lives in the house and this happened because it opens up all these kinds of questions," Wamp said. But he said, "I'm not going to be the guy who goes out and talks." After we read that quote from the Knoxville News Sentinel on this show a few days ago, Congressman Wamp complained to us, insisting that those who live in the house are not actually sworn to secrecy, even though that was the clear implication of what he told that Knoxville paper. We followed up with the Knoxville News Sentinel again today, and again they say that Congressman Wamp's office has made no complaint to them like the one he's made to us. He's still only complaining to us for broadcasting what the paper printed. Now, Congressman Wamp has given another interview about The Family, this time to the Chattanooga Times Free Press. They asked him specifically about the C Street house.
It's a place that people can go off the hill and in a bipartisan way get along and, hold each other accountable. But it's not like there's really nothing to talk about. So except that that's what we chose to do.
Well, it seems like by all accounts it seems to be a secretive group that people.
But it's not. I'm just telling you, it's where people live, and you go there to fellowship, and we happen to have the common denominator of our faith. But that's a good thing.
It's a good thing. There's really nothing to talk about. We hold each other accountable. We're all sworn not to talk about this thing, but it's not like that means it's secretive.
They didn't want to violate people's private decisions to come there. And you know what happens when you share and the media writes about it? Nobody comes and the whole thing evaporates. That's why. It's not secretive. It's that's the only way something like this can exist. That's why it happens that way, man. So it's not like anybody's trying to hide anything. It's so that people will feel like they can.
It's not secretive. It's that's the only way something like this can exist. It's not secretive. It's just that if we don't keep secrets, nobody will come talk to us. Nobody will join. So they all knew about Governor Sanford's affair in Argentina and Senator Ensign's affair with his campaign treasurer. They knew about those affairs for months while those affairs were kept secret from everyone else. In both the John Ensign case and the Mark Sanford case, the more we learn about the theology of this secret group, its reason for being, the way it operates, the more the group seems to explain how these politicians were able to involve many, many other members of Congress and even former members of Congress in keeping their affairs secret. And why both men who had called on other politicians to resign when they'd had affairs are themselves refusing to resign themselves now that they have been caught doing the same thing. There's still a lot we don't know about C Street, but the picture that's beginning to emerge is of a group whose members essentially agree to disclose their secrets to one another as an alternative to disclosing them to anyone else. Members who agree not to talk about the family, but who are accountable for their actions to the family and to nobody else. Democracy, right? Joining us now once again is Jeff Sharlet. He lived with members of this secret organization for a year as part of some extraordinary reporting he did for Harper's Magazine. That reporting turned into one of the hottest books on the market right now. It's called The Family, The Secret Fundamentalism at the Heart of American Power. It's out now in paperback. Jeff, thanks very much for coming back on the show tonight.
Hi, Rachel. Thanks for having me.
When it comes to the issue of giving up any power, I feel like the more these members of the group start to talk publicly now, I'm starting to get a sense of a standard here. If you're in the group, the outcome of a scandal like this is about your personal well-being. If you're not in the group, you have to give up power as the honorable thing to do. Do you feel like, from what you know about this group, that there is something going on about internal accountability to the members of the family replacing accountability to anybody else?
That's exactly it. When they talk about accountability, they're referring to accountability to your fellow brothers in this fellowship. Zach Wamp himself, in fact, has cited a scripture verse that says, when you walk in this special fellowship together, you are purified of all sin. But only when you're in that fellowship, only when you're in this family. If you're outside of the family, well, then you're accountable to the public. But inside the family, you are accountable to a higher calling, which is this idea that the family teaches the politicians involved that they've been chosen for their leadership positions not by the people who elected them, but by God, who they believe put them in power.
That's why the secretive nature of this group, I think, has anti-democratic, small d democratic implications. And I think that's why the C Street and the family has turned out to be the much larger story than these two individual affairs. Jeff, Congressman Largent said that those who live in the House give each other license to intervene in each other's affairs. What do you know about that? How does that work?
Yeah, that reflects a document that you're given as you sort of move up into positions of authority within the group. You're assigned to a sort of a core group, and that's what Ensign and Coburn and Largent were in, along with Senator Sam Brownback was involved with that group as well. And when you join this group, which they describe as a publicly invisible but privately identifiable group of companions, or an invisible believing group, when you join this group, you agree to give the other men in your prayer cell, they also call it a prayer cell, you agree to give them veto rights over your life. And we've seen that with Senator Ensign and the way in which the affair was handled, and these questions around whether who directed him to give money to his mistress. I mean, it seems like he's getting instruction from the group, and that's what I think former Congressman Largent's referring to when he says you give one another license.
On that issue of secrecy, Congressman Wamp, as I mentioned in the introduction, complained to us about our essentially reading a quote from a newspaper when he didn't complain to the newspaper about it. And I raised that again because Congressman Wamp seems to sort of be tying himself into knots about the issue of secrecy, simultaneously complaining this group isn't secretive, but also saying that if they didn't keep secrets, then the group would have no power. Nobody would join and the group would go away. I know you've been talking about this in terms of how it functions among these individual members, but is secrecy integral to their idea of power and their version of Christianity?
Absolutely. They would defend it by saying, look, we're avoiding institutionalization. We don't want to get all gunked up with bureaucracy. At the same time, the model they give is they say, look, we are a Christian mafia. We're modeled like the mafia. And this is like the mafia. We function invisibly. Doug Coe, the leader of the group, who's been spiritually counseling these congressmen through their affairs and so on, says the more invisible you can make your organization, the more influence you'll have. You know, Congressman Zach Wamp said, you know, there's nothing to hide here. To which I can only respond, why are so many internal family documents that you can get, if you get a hold of the internal documents, marked, please destroy after reading? I don't write that on my documents. That seems like something you're doing if you are trying to hide. In fact, the specific document I'm thinking of says, we don't want this to leak out to the public. We don't want our political activities to leak out to the public.
In terms of the fact that members of these groups agree to divulge matters amongst themselves, but not with the outside world, in thinking about this and starting to figure this out with the way they relate to the Senator Ensign scandal, the Senator Sanford scandal, it got me wondering about the limits of this. I mean, if a member of a prayer cell, one of these groups, came to the group and said, I've committed murder, would they feel an obligation to tell people outside the group? What's the limit of what they would keep to themselves? These guys, a lot of people here kept these affairs secret from the public for months.
Yeah. You know, I think one of the things we have to do when we're looking at religious groups like the family, we have to take their beliefs seriously. So when they say your first loyalty is not to your constituents, it's not to the public that elects you, it's not even to your own personal family, it's to your brothers in this family, they mean it, and they do believe it seriously. So I think if you look at those kinds of situations where possibly a crime is being committed, I think the family is going to attempt to address that internally. And when you look back at their history, certainly with some of the foreign leaders they've dealt with, that's exactly how they've done it. They were very involved with a lot of the death squad leaders in Central America. And they would say, look, we might discuss that internally, but they're not going to go public with very literally the murder those guys were committing. And I think we see on the level of these sort of personal ethics and professional ethics that Senator Ensign and Governor Sanford are displaying, we see that same kind of approach of loyalty to the sect above loyalty to the public, to the constituents, to the people of America.
Jeff Sharlet, author of The Family, The Secret Fundamentalism at the Heart of American Power. Jeff, as always, scary and illuminating. Thanks for coming back on the show.
Thanks very much, Rachel.